Hey everybody, Aaron Mack, BS Detector. I wanted to pick up where we left off reading because it's going to be a long weekend and I may not get to record like tomorrow night or whatever. I got to work tomorrow and Saturday night. So I just got home and I figured I would read a little. So this is the third part of us reading The 13th Tribe by Arthur Koestler. And if you know anything about Bible, you know there are only 12 tribes. So what even is the title inferring here? It's inferring that this 13th tribe is a made up tribe, right? Which also, just so y'all know, I've got two books coming. One is about Fauci, and one is about, it's called The Invention of the J-ish People, and it's written by a guy named Shlomo Sands. I don't know what's with all these J's that are writing books exposing other J's, but I'm here for it. Anyways, okay, so where we were at, we were talking about, I'm just going to read the last paragraph of where we left off so we'll know, where we're picking up at. It says, we shall see that human sacrifice was also practiced by the Khazars, including the ritual unaliving of the king at the end of his reign. We may assume that many other similarities existed between the customs of the tribes described by Ibn Fadlan and those of the Khazars. Unfortunately, he was debarred from visiting the Khazar capital and had to rely on information collected in territories under Khazar dominion, and particularly at the Bulgar court. Okay, now, this is chapter 10. It took the caliph's mission nearly a year, from June 1st, in the year 921, to May 12th, the year 922, to reach its destination, the land of the Volga Bulgars. The direct route from Baghdad to the Volga leads across the Caucasus and Khazaria. To avoid the latter, they had to make the enormous detour around the eastern shore of the Khazar Sea, the Caspian. Even so, they were constantly reminded of the proximity of the Khazars and its potential dangers. It sounds like these people were absolute savages, is what it sounds like. A characteristic episode took place during their sojourn with the Goose, army chief, the one with the disreputable underwear. Did we read something about disreputable underwear? I don't know, I must have missed that. They were at first well received and given a banquet, but later the Goose leaders had second thoughts because of their relations with the Khazars. The chief assembled the leaders to decide what to do. The most distinguished and influential among them was Tarkhan. He was lame and blind and had a maimed hand, but he was the most influential. Very weird, right? The chief said to them, quote, "These are the messengers of the king of the Arabs, and I do not feel authorized to let them proceed without consulting you." End quote. Then the Tarkhan spoke, quote, "This is a matter the like of which we have never seen or heard before. Never has an ambassador of the Sultan traveled through our country since we and our ancestors have been here. Without doubt, the Sultan is deceiving us. These people he is really sending to the Khazars to stir them up against us. The best will be to cut each of these messengers into two and to confiscate all their belongings." End quote. Another one said, quote, "No, we should take their belongings and let them run back naked whence they came." End quote. And another said, quote, "No, the Khazar king holds hostages from us. Let us send these people to ransom them." End quote. They argued among themselves for 7 days, while Ibn Fadlan and his people feared the worst. In the end, the Goose let them go. We are not told why. Probably Ibn Fadlan succeeded in persuading them that his mission was in fact directed against the Khazars. The Goose had earlier on fought with the Khazars against another Turkish tribe, the Pechenegs, but more recently had shown a hostile attitude, hence the hostages the Khazars took. The Khazar menace loomed large on the horizon all along the journey. North of the Caspian, they made another huge detour before reaching the Bulgar encampment, somewhere near the confluence of the Volga and the Kama. There the king and leaders of the Bulgars were waiting for them in a state of acute anxiety. As soon as the ceremonies and festivities were over, the king sent for Ibn Fadlan to discuss business. He reminded Ibn Fadlan in forceful language, and this is in parentheses and quotations. His voice sounded as if he were speaking from the bottom of a barrel, end quote, in parentheses. Of the main purpose of the mission, to wit, the money to be paid to him, quote, so that I shall be able to find a fortress to protect me from the Jews who subjugate me, end quote. So they were already identifying as Jays in the 900s, but they were practicing Judaism, not biblical Old Testament, Pentateuch, Tanakh, whatever you want to call it, Torah. They weren't doing that because clearly, I mean, look at how savage they were. So anyways, unfortunately, that money, a sum of 4,000 dinars, had not been handed over to the mission, owing to some complicated matter of red tape. It was to be sent later on. On learning this, the king, quote, a personality of impressive appearance, broad and corpulent, end quote, seemed close to despair. He suspected the mission of having defrauded the money. Quote, what would you think of a group of men who are given a sum of money destined for a people that is weak, besieged, and oppressed? Yet these men defraud the money, end quote. I replied, this is forbidden. Those men would be evil. He asked, is this a matter of opinion or a matter of general consent? I replied, quote, a matter of general consent, end quote. Gradually, Ibn Fadlan succeeded in convincing the king that the money was only delayed, but not to allay his anxieties. The king kept repeating that the whole point of the invitation was the building of the fortress, quote, because he was afraid of the king of the Khazars, end quote. And apparently he had every reason to be afraid, as Ibn Fadlan relates. The Bulgar king's son was held as a hostage by the king of the Khazars. It was reported to the king of the Khazars that the Bulgar king had a beautiful daughter. He sent a messenger to sue for her. The Bulgar king used pretext to refuse his consent. The Khazar sent another messenger and took her by force, though he was a Jay and she a Muslim. But she died at his court. So you see how long these Jays and these Muslims have gone back into history? I mean, like literally over 1,000 years, and yet they're supposed to be like mortal enemies. Very sus. Anyways, the Khazar sent another messenger and asked if the Bulgar king's for the Bulgar king's other daughter. But in the very hour when the messenger reached him, the Bulgar king hurriedly married her to the prince of Askell, who was his subject. There is a asterisk, but I don't see for a footnote, but I don't see the asterisk. Anyways, so let's go back to what I was saying. The Bulgar king hurriedly married her to the prince of the Askell, who was his subject, for fear that the Khazar would take her too by force, as he had done with her sister. This alone was the reason which made the Bulgar king enter into correspondence with the caliph and ask him to have a fortress built, because he feared the king of the Khazars. It sounds like the king of the Khazars was a savage nutcase, and that they all are a bunch of savage nutcases. Hence the goings on in the Middle East right meow that we're being gaslit about and lied to about. Okay. So it sounds like a refrain. Ibn Fadlan also specifies the annual tribute the Bulgar king had to pay the Khazars, one sable fur from each household in his realm. Since the number of Bulgar households, i.e. tents, is estimated to have been around 50,000, and since Bulgar sable fur was highly valued all over the world, the tribute was a handsome one. Yeah. So this whole greedy trope, these stereotypes come from real places, people. Okay. So chapter 11. What Ibn Fadlan has to tell us about the Khazars is based, as already mentioned, on intelligence collected in the course of his journey, but mainly at the Bulgar court. So he's getting it from the other side of the people that were like very fearful of the Khazars and the people that had to make tribute every year. I mean, 50,000 furs, that's crazy. Okay. So Unlike the rest of his narrative, derived from vivid personal observation, the pages on the Khazars contain secondhand, potted information and fall rather flat. Moreover, the sources of his information are biased in view of the Bulgar king's understandable dislike of his Khazar overlord, which I basically just said. While the caliphate's resentment of a kingdom embracing a rival religion need hardly be stressed, the narrative switches abruptly from a description of the Rus court to the Khazar court. Concerning the king of the Khazars, whose title is Kagan, he appears in public only once every 4 months. They call him the Great Kagan. His deputy is called Kagan Bek. He is the one who commands and supplies the armies, manages the affairs of the state, appears in public, and leads in war, which apparently they like to do. That's their thing, baby. They love to go to war with people, and we've seen that even in our lifetime. How many wars have we done at the behest of Yasharel, God's chosen people? Quote, end quote. Anyways, okay, where was I? Okay. While the caliphate's resentment of a kingdom embraced a rival religion need hardly be stressed. Okay, the narrative switches abruptly from description of the Rus court to the Khazar court. Okay. Concerning the king of the Khazars, whose title is Kagan, he appears in public only once every 4 months. They call him the Great Kagan. His deputy is called Kagan Bek. He's the one who commands. Okay, we've already done that. Okay, the neighboring kings obey his orders. He enters every day into the presence of the Great Kagan with deference and modesty, barefooted, carrying a stick of wood in his hand. He makes obeisance, lights the stick, and when it has burned down, he sits down on the throne of the king's right. Next to him in rank is a man called the Kinderkagan. It says K-ND-R, Kinderkagan. And next to that one, the Jaw Sugar Kagan. These words, what? It is the custom of the Great Kagan not to have social intercourse with people and not talk with them, and to admit nobody into his presence except those we have mentioned. The power to bind or release, to mete out punishment, and to govern the country belongs to his deputy, the Kagan Bek. It is a further custom of the Great Kagan that when he dies, a great building is built for him, containing 20 chambers, and in each chamber a grave is dug for him. Stones are broken until they become like powder, which is spread over the floor and covered with pitch. Beneath the building flows a river, and this river is large and rapid. They divert the river water over the grave, as they say that this is done so that no devil, no man, no worm, and no creeping creatures can get at him. After he has been buried, those who buried him are decapitated. What? So that nobody may know in which of the chambers is his grave. The grave is called, quote, paradise. And they have a saying, quote, he has entered paradise, end quote. All the chambers are spread with silk, brocade, interwoven with threads of gold. Sounds a bit much. It is the custom of the king of the Khazars to have 25 wives. Each of the wives is the daughter of a king who owes him allegiance. He takes them by consent or by force. He has 60 girls for concubines, each of them of exquisite beauty. Ibn Fadlan then proceeds to give a rather fanciful description of the Kagan's harem, where each of the 85 wives and concubines has a, quote, palace of her own, and an attendant or eunuch who, at the king's command, brings her to his alcove, quote, faster than the blinking of an eye, end quote. After a few more dubious remarks about the, quote, customs, end quote, of the Khazar Kagan, we shall return to them later. Ibn Fadlan at last provides some factual information about the country. The king has a great city on the river Itil, which is the Volga, on both banks. On one bank lives the Muslims, and on the other bank, the king and his court. So these people have been living side by side with the Muslims for centuries and centuries. Okay. So to think that they're like mortal enemies is quite naive, I believe. And probably propaganda from the media that is also owned by these very same people. Or the descendants, I guess. Anyways. So, okay. The Muslims are governed by one of the king's officials who is himself a Muslim. The lawsuits of the Muslims living in the Khazar capital and of visiting merchants from abroad are looked after by that official. Nobody else meddles in their affairs or sits in judgment over them. Ibn Fadlan's travel report, as far as it is preserved, ends with the words, "The Khazars and their king are all Jays. The Bulgars," okay, wait, and then there's an asterisk, all after, okay, it says this sounds like an exaggeration in view of the existence of a Muslim community in the capital. Zeki Validi accordingly suppressed the word, quote, all. We must assume that the Khazars here refers to the ruling nation or tribe within the ethnic mosaic of Khazaria, and that the Muslims enjoyed legal and religious autonomy but were not considered as real Khazars. Okay, where were we? Okay. The Bulgars and all their neighbors are subject to him. They treat him with worshipful obedience. Some are of the opinion that Gog and Magog are the Khazars. And isn't that interesting? Because we've got people like, good grief. I mean, so many freaking people, okay, on this app talking about we're waiting for the Gog and Magog war and all this stuff. And the more I start to look at stuff, the more I'm starting to become like a full preterist. Like, I think I was a little seasonist for a hot minute, but I'm starting to, more I find out, the more it just seems like all of it has already happened. So who knows when we are in time? Anyway, that's pretty wild, though, that some are of the opinion that Gog and Magog are the Khazars. Very, very interesting. Okay, chapter 12. I have quoted Ibn Fadlan's Odyssey at some length, not so much because of the scant information he provides about the Khazars themselves, but because of the light it throws on the world which surrounded them, the stark barbarity of the people amidst whom they lived, reflecting their own past prior to the conversion, for by the time of Ibn Fadlan's visit to the Bulgars, Khazaria was a surprisingly modern country compared to its neighbors. The contrast is evidenced by the reports of other Arab historians. And then there's another footnote. It says the following pages are based on the works of Istakri al-Masudi, Ibn Rusta, and Ibn Hakal. Okay, and is very present on every level, from housing to the administration of justice. The Bulgars still live exclusively in tents, including the king, although the royal tent is, quote, very large, holding 1,000 people or more, end quote. On the other hand, the Khazar Kagan inhabits a castle built of burnt brick. His ladies are said to inhabit, quote, palaces with roofs of teak, end quote. And the Muslims have several mosques, among them, quote, one whose minaret rises above the royal castle, end quote. In the fertile regions, their farms and cultivated areas stretched out continuously over 60 or 70 miles. They also had extensive vineyards. Thus, Ibn Hakal, quote, in Khazar, which is Khazaria, there's a certain city called Azmid or Samandar, which has so many orchards and gardens that from Darband to Sarir, the whole country is covered with gardens and plantations belonging to this city. It is said that there are about 40,000 of them. Many of these produce grapes. The region north of the Caucasus was extremely fertile. In AD 968, Ibn Hakal met a man who had visited it after a Russian raid. Quote, he said there is not a pittance left for the poor in any vineyard or garden, not a leaf on the bough. But, owing to the excellence of their land and the abundance of its produce, it will not take 3 years until it becomes again what it was, end quote. Caucasian wine is still a delight, consumed in vast quantities in the Soviet Union. Caucasian, isn't that interesting? Caucasians are Eastern Europeans. Like, it drives me crazy when people just call all white people Caucasians. We're not all Caucasian. Like, a lot of us are Anglo-Saxon or Anglo, which is from Western Europe, like England. Anyway, okay. So it says, however, the royal treasury's main source of income was foreign trade. The sheer volume of the trading caravans plying their way between Central Asia and the Volga Ural region is indicated by Ibn Fadlan. We remember that the caravan, his mission joined at Gurganj, it consisted of 5,000 men and 3,000 pack animals. Making due allowance for exaggeration, it must still have been a mighty caravan, and we do not know how many of these were at any time on the move, nor what goods they transported. Although textiles, dried fruit, honey, wax, and spices seem to have played an important part. A second major trade route led across the Caucasus to Armenia, Georgia, Persia, and Byzantium. A third consisted of the increasing traffic of Rus merchant fleets down the Volga to the eastern shores of the Khazar Sea, carrying mainly precious furs, much in demand among the Muslim aristocracy, and slaves from the north, sold at the slave market of Ital. On all these transit goods, including the slaves, the Khazar ruler levied a tax, often percent. Adding to this, the tribute paid by Bulgars, remember the 50,000 furs, okay, Magyars, Bertas, and so on, one realizes that Khazaria was a prosperous country, but also that its prosperity depended to a large extent on its military power and the prestige it conveyed on its tax collectors and customs officials. Apart from the fertile regions of the south, with their vineyards, orchards, and orchards, the country was poor in natural resources. One Arab historian, Istakri, says that the only native product they exported was isinglass. This again is certainly an exaggeration, yet the fact remains that their main commercial activity seems to have consisted in re-exporting goods brought from abroad. Among these goods, honey and candle wax particularly caught the Arab chronicler's imagination. Thus, Muqaddasi, quote, in Khazaria, sheep, honey, and Jews exist in large quantities, end quote. Well, isn't that quite the quote? It is true that one source, the Darban Nama, mentions gold or silver mines in Khazar territory, but their location has not been ascertained. On the other hand, several of the sources mention Khazar merchandise seen in Baghdad and the presence of Khazar merchants in Constantinople, Alexandria, and as far afield as Samarra and Fergana. Thus, Khazaria was by no means isolated from the civilized world. Compared to its tribal neighbors in the north, it was a cosmopolitan country open to all sorts of cultural and religious influences, yet jealously defending its independence against the two ecclesiastical world powers. We shall see that this attitude prepared the ground for the coup d'etat, or coup d'etat, which established Judaism as the state religion. And that's where shit gets real. The arts and crafts seem to have flourished, including haute couture, when the future Emperor Constantine V married the Khazar Kagan's daughter. She brought with her dowry a splendid dress which so impressed the Byzantine court that it was adopted as a male ceremonial robe. They called it Zitsakayon. So, like, it's almost like the word tzitzit, which is like the tassels that the ancient Hebrews wore on the edges of their clothing. So, what an interesting word. And it says it's derived from the Khazar Turkish pet name of the princess, which was Chichak or flower, until she was baptized Irene. I don't even know what that means. Quote, here, Toynbee comments, quote, we have an illuminating fragment of cultural history, end quote. When another Khazar princess married the Muslim governor of Armenia, her cavalcade contained, apart from attendants and slaves, 10 tents mounted on wheels, quote, made of the finest silk with gold and silver plated doors, the floors covered with sable furs. 20 others carried the gold and silver vessels and other treasures which were her dowry, end quote. The Kagan himself traveled in a mobile tent, even more luxuriously equipped, carrying on its top a pomegranate of gold. You know what this makes me think of? The Romany Gypsies. If anybody's ever seen the Brad Pitt movie, oh God, what was it called? It was set in England, and he was like a boxer. He was a pikey. Me caravan from me ma, Pettywinkle Blue. Anyways, that's what it makes me think of. So, anyways, we're gonna do. Let's see how much time we've got. Okay, I'm gonna read just a couple of these short chapters, and I'm gonna probably quit because it is 4 o'clock in the morning, and I need to let my dog out, feed her, take a shower, go to bed, so I can get up and go to work all over again tomorrow. So, anyways, okay, chapter 13. Khazar art, like that of the Bulgars and Magyars, was mainly imitative, modeled on Persian Sassanid patterns. The Soviet archaeologist Bader emphasized the role of the Khazars in the spreading of Persian-style silverware towards the north. Some of these finds may have been re-exported by the Khazars, true to their role as middlemen. Others were imitations made in Khazar workshops, the ruins of which have been traced near the ancient Khazar fortress of Sarkal. Unfortunately, Sarkal, the most important Khazar archaeological site, has been flooded by the reservoir of a newly built hydroelectric station. I don't think that's a quinky dink. I think that was done on purpose to cover any evidence. You know what I'm saying? So these people can pretend to be ancient Hebrews when they not. Okay, the jewelry unearthed within the confines of the fortress was of local manufacture. The Swedish archaeologist T.J. Arn mentions ornamental plates, clasps, and buckles found as far as Sweden of Sassanid and Byzantine inspiration, manufactured in Khazaria or territories under their influence. Okay, Punky, hold on. Let mommy finish reading this and I'll be done. Thus, the Khazars were the principal intermediaries in the spreading of Persian and Byzantine art among the semi-barbaric tribes of Eastern Europe. After his exhaustive survey of the archaeological documentary evidence, mostly from Soviet sources, Bartha concludes, the sack of Tiflis by the Khazars, presumably in the spring of AD 629, is relevant to our subject. During the period of occupation, the Khagans sent out inspectors to supervise the manufacture of gold, silver, iron, and copper products. Similarly, the bazaars, trade in general, even the fisheries, were under their control. Thus, in the course of their incessant Caucasian campaigns during the 7th century, the Khazars made contact with a culture which had grown out of the Persian Sassanid tradition. Accordingly, the products of this culture spread to the people of the steppes not only by trade but by means of plunder and even by taxation. All the tracks that we have assiduously followed in the hopes of discovering the origins of Magyar art in the 10th century have led us back to Khazar territory. The last remark of the Hungarian scholar refers to the spectacular archaeological finds known as, quote, the treasure of Nags and Miklos. Say that 3 times fast. The treasure, consisting of 23 gold vessels dating from the 10th century, was found in 1791 in the vicinity of the village of that name. It now belongs to Romania and is called Senekalal Mare. Bartha points out that the figure of the, quote, victorious prince, end quote, dragging a prisoner along by his hair, and the mythological scene at the back of the golden jar, as well as the design of other ornamental objects, show close affinities with the finds in Novi Pazar in Bulgaria and in Khazar Sarkel, as both Magyars and Bulgars were under Khazar suzerainty for protracted periods. This is not very surprising, and the warrior, together with the rest of the treasure, gives us at least some idea of the arts practiced within Khazar Empire. The Persian and Byzantine influence is predominant, as one would expect. The interested reader will find an excellent collection of photographs in Gyula Laszlo's art, The Art of the Migration Period, although his historical comments have to be treated with caution. One school of Hungarian archaeologists maintains that the 10th century gold of silversmiths working in Hungary were actually Khazars. As we shall see later on, when the Magyars migrated to Hungary in 896, they were led by a dissident Khazar tribe known as the Kabars, who settled with them in their new home. The Kabar Khazars were known as skilled gold and silversmiths. The originally more primitive Magyars only acquired these skills in their new country. Thus, the theory of the Khazar origin of at least some of the archaeological finds in Hungary is not implausible, as will become clearer in the light of the Magyar Khazar nexus discussed later on. And on that, I'm going to end. My dog needs to go out. I need to wash my ass and put my jams on so I can go to work. I just wanted to post something because it's been a few days. Anyways, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you're not believing the BS out there. We're going to get down to the bottom of it, friends. Much love. Have a good night, morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are.